exploring small moments of lasting impact. It's the Atomic Jolt podcast with your host, Martin Cartledge.
Well, Mike, we're talking about photography, right? We're still talking about that?
Yeah.
Cool. I was kind of excited to talk about Nintendo 64, but photography, that's cool too. It fits just as well.
Yeah,
So,
like that was just gonna be it was gonna be hard for me to like really in my own mind break that down, because I love that's such a big thing. I love N64, but as far as like atomic jolts go, I feel like after hearing some of your other guests episodes and just listening, is like I felt pretty sure that photography was like my number one atomic jolt in my life.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, having known you for like 15 or 16 years and like seeing you go through a lot of different like hobbies and interests, photography was something that stuck out to me as something that you might pick, but is also someone that has played a fair amount of N64 with you, and like how much I know you and your family like love Nintendo as a whole. It like wasn't surprising on that either. So maybe, well, I don't know, we can find a way to squeeze your love of Nintendo into an episode in the future.
Oh, I hope so, dude.
Like we should probably just have your like figure out a way to have your whole family on, and so you all can just talk about Mario Party and stuff like that too.
Oh wow, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I can only imagine what that would sound like and how awesome and unbearable to listen to that would be. But yeah, we should definitely do that.
That would be awesome. So photography, when did you start, when did you kind of think you were into it, or like when did that start? Because it seems like something that could potentially be something that you just have like a idle interest in for a long time, but then you just one day like start taking it more seriously. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that is what it was. I mean, it was idle interest, but I always liked it, like I remember my dad like always had some of the early like or some of the like late stage Canon SLRs. So they were they were like 35 millimeter film still cameras, and he had like a small collection of them, that probably had been released between like 1988 and 1994 or something like that. So it's like EOS 1. It was like the early EOS models that Canon was releasing, and those would just be around. And I always thought that they were cool as contraptions, and I would always pretend to take photos with them. But because I couldn't go and get them developed, and I wasn't ever a part of that process or never really saw that side of it, it kind of was just like that was a muted interest. It was like I liked the mechanics of the thing and I knew what it did, but I never got to see the results. So it wasn't until like very early 2000s when digital photography was like catching on, and like some of those cameras were becoming like consumer affordable, and my mom, I remember, got had like those Canon ELPH cameras, and they slowly like those what had once been sort of those like mysterious objects that were lying around the house, all of a sudden there were these new versions of them where I could immediately see the results of like there's no more pretending, and so I remember that being like a spark where it was like I just kind of became a little bit more addicted to doing it, and then seeing what I could do like just around my house or when I was growing up or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. So taking a step back, you say that your dad kind of had them around the house. Was that something he was into, or did he mainly like them just to collect, or like what was that relationship between photography and your dad like?
Yeah, so I think that my dad's career is sort of like something that like as I've gotten older I've been able to like see many just familiarities and like kind of draw lines of parallel where I didn't really realize that they were there before. But yeah, it was like I think that he had kind of fallen into the world of photography through like a necessity, because he was like into writing, and he was just kind of like a writer, and his schooling and the direction that he was kind of looking at taking when he was in school and stuff was always kind of around just playing music and then writing it as a journalist. So like editorial stuff. He always did that. letter writing sort of style, and then like a lot of a lot of like editorial writing for like, you know, what at the time was my grandpa's magazine that he was running called the Texas Longhorn Journal. So like that was like a very industrial magazine, you know, where it was like, you can imagine what kind of copy goes into a magazine that sells ads for that industry, right? So that was like, I think that like along with that, because my dad was writing for that magazine, he also went on trips and took livestock photos and took pictures of people at events like rodeo, you know, these like auctions that they do for Texas Longhorns. And, you know, that's my family's kind of embedded history with my grandpa being at the helm. It's like he did livestock. He was also in communications and publishing. My dad like was brought into that by default as a young adult. And so then my grandpa and my dad, although neither of them really considered themselves to be like full-on photographers, they both had like cameras lying around that were just part of their publication process. So yeah.
So it seems like your grandpa just ran like a ranch and then this magazine, and it seemed like they were way more interested in the actual practice of a ranch and like the actual writing process, and photography was kind of secondary and something that you needed to also put in a magazine. You couldn't just have like 25 pages just of just text, a wall of text. So it just was like, well, I guess we need to take pictures too. Is that right?
Correct. And yeah, well, and actually my grandpa had done one other magazine before, and it was centered around it was a publication documenting the progression and inception of the cable television industry. So it's like same kind of thing, right? Like what are these photos for doing for like, you know, cable TV and all this stuff? It really could be a lot of words, but like along with that, you need pictures of the people and you need pictures of this and that. Probably a little bit more important in some ways with the livestock and cattle thing, because it's like your trade, that whole industry is based on trade. So you do have to have pictures of cows no matter what.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like you said, you're right. It was kind of like, here's this machine, here's this thing that's moving, and photos are a part of it.
Mm-hmm. And so if your grandpa is involved in ranching and running the Texas Longhorn magazine, you were, I know, but for the people listening, you were raised in an environment that was not rural Colorado, but definitely more open spacey and ranch oriented. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. It was like pretty isolated as a child, you know. It was like until you have a driver's license, it's like you're just kind of around nature and, you know, ranch operations.
Yeah. So I imagine when you start picking up the camera and when you maybe start taking more of an interest in it, the kind of stuff you would take photos of were like nature and the same kind of stuff that was maybe around, like as far as you could walk was like your kind of bucket of material, since you obviously couldn't drive at that age.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially early on, you know, as I was kind of like messing with the photography, but there is like this whole other side to the spark and the evolution of that, because yes, I was only really surrounded by nature, and that was like definitely something that like I would say that like half of like my early photos that I was taking that I was able to like kind of look at and reflect on and start editing and messing around with were of like animals and trees and barbed wire fences and stuff like that. But at the same time, we happened to also have like a big concrete slab behind my parents' house at that same age. So skateboarding became a huge part of my life at around like age 11 ish, like is when I became obsessed with skateboarding. And skateboarding definitely inspired and fueled like a huge part of my interest in photography as that was developing as well. So it was kind of like those two things were definitely feeding on each other between like the ages of like 11 and 14, 15, 16, like pretty hardcore, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And so this might go off into like two different places. It's a good segue though. It's like, what did you like about photography? And if it sounds like it was more of just something to do in a way to capture like nature and things around your house, and it was just like another form of, I don't know, like a pastime, and it was cool and interesting, but you're at the age 11 or so, you get really into skateboarding, and I'm pretty sure you quickly realized all the media and photos and everything around with skateboarding. And so that, I imagine, probably piqued your interest too, of like, I could capture things like that too. Yeah, so I guess what parts of it did you like? Was it both? Where I guess it sounds like skateboarding probably took more like precedence for a while though.
Yeah, I mean, it never fully like photography has always like existed in my life since I've like was introduced to it, like separate from skateboarding, but also, but like skateboarding has never existed in my life separate from photography, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
like I've always taken photos of other things, but like I've never been able to like, I've never gone like super hard on like a skate endeavor, like I've never like approached like a skateboarding goal without photography being involved, because to me it was like I knew I liked taking pictures at like those ages early on, and I knew that like I knew that that was something that I liked. But I think that the first time that I ever was able to document either myself doing a trick or one of my friends, and like actually be proud of the result of whether it was like I'm not sure if this was like an old like mini DV clip on like one of the like old Panasonic video cameras that my parents had, or if it was like a still photo, because there was a lot of both happening all at once, right? It was like, however, to be able to try to record skating, get sick pictures or get some sick video clips. The sick video clips weren't happening. Like pictures were much easier at the time when you're 11 and you can literally walk the skateboard up to the top of a ramp and pose with it. And it's like, bro, look at that. Like, do that. Like we would do that. So I think that like the feeling of being able to actually document a trick, and like the first time I was like, oh, this thing just happened in front of me and I was here. Like it's like, and I feel like this to this day still, but like I think I always kind of have felt like my favorite thing about photography is like kind of the action of it, like being there at the time that something is taking place in like a documentary way. Like a good photo is a good photo, and I do love sick fucking pics, like that's great, but like I think that the feeling of like being there and like knowing like you were the person there with the camera and you were at that range of like whatever was happening, like that to me is really cool. And like skateboarding was, I think, the first time anything that crazy had happened in front of my camera. It was like I remember sitting out and like waiting for like red-winged blackbirds to come and like land on like a half decayed carcass of some animal and like waiting to like take pictures of them eating the dead thing back in the day. But I think that like the feeling of like boom boom, here's a skateboard trick, and like you caught this moment of that was like an addictive, and like I think that was like a jolt of some sort for sure.
Yeah, well, you beat me to it. I was going to say why did you like, if you could kind of isolate why you liked photography in a more nature sense, but there you go, being out on a ranch waiting for a bird to like literally come down and just rip apart like a half decayed carcass. There you go. And especially to like an 11-year-old kid. I'm sure, I mean, that's universally probably pretty cool. And for skateboarding, where you could, just like set up, like have your own setup, do some like pose or something and then have it frozen in time forever. And like to have it, be able to show your friends. So when did you start using like a camera with your friends with skateboarding? Like, was that basically as soon as you realized you could use it with skateboarding, or tell me about that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was like when I think about my introduction to skateboarding, it was really like my mom was like, my parents had me pretty young, and they were like, but they were conservative people. So they were kind of like this weird combination of like youthful parents with living in a very conservative place with with conservative bubbles around them. But they definitely, like my whole upbringing, they would just blast me with little gems, like without me even knowing what they were introducing me to. But like my mom would watch Jackass, right? And she would call me in for some of the pranks because she would like field them and not let me watch entire episodes, but she would call me in for some of this stuff. And I remember like when and where I remember being 12 years old and like in her bedroom, and we were watching Jackass, and it was like one of the stunts that they were doing with Bam Margera when he was like so young, and they were just dressing up somebody in a gorilla costume. and then like doing like a tow rope on the back of a car with a skateboard and like Bam is like dressed up in a fucking monkey suit and he just, they're just seeing how fast they can go before he like inevitably just dies. And like I remember that like connection of thought being like, somebody's like making this, somebody's getting paid to film this, like there's this is happening on MTV, like this, and it was just like that showed me like a real world example of like people doing exactly what I was hoping to do with photography, if like videography, photography, like it really, those worlds to me were just like in such close, like at the time, it was just like I didn't know what really like why or what was like the focus there. It was just like whatever the coolest means to document something, and like a lot of times the practicality of that was photos at the time, because video had not come that far. And it was like, also again, you can just frame something up and make it look really cool. And that was my version of doing Jackass, was to try to take the coolest still photo on a digital camera that I could, like at Monument Skate Park or wherever we were at the time, like so yeah.
Yeah. So would you say that like it sounds like Jackass was like kind of your first unintentional influence?
Yeah, like when Jackass introduced me to CKY, which introduced me to Thrasher and everything that I found about skateboarding photography.
Mm-hmm.
It was like boom, boom. There was no that. And my friend, my neighbor, Mike McCarthy, who had I think he had like an X Games target board, but he had a Spitfire, one of the giant Spitfire stickers, like in the very middle of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 11 years old, and when I saw that, like it was that and Jackass. Those two things like introduced me to the whole world of Thrasher magazine and Transworld at the time, which you could occasionally find at like the local King Supers, and that was just like unreal growing up in Farmville. Like for me on a ranch, like there was a lot of that craving. Like there was a lot of that, like those photographs in like the like little audio pamphlet handouts that would come with like the DVD slips that they gave out at skate shops. Like all of that stuff was photography, and all of that stuff was selling me on what skateboarding was 100%, and it was like that I can definitely attribute all that to my mom and Jackass and that one dude having a Spitfire sticker on his X Games deck.
Yeah. So I think having this awakening that the tool you are super into can lead to things like Jackass and all this other like content that Transworld, Thrasher, the skateboarding kind of industry as a whole is doing. You probably had, it sounds like you had that epiphany of like, I could just create that kind of content for myself too, using this thing. So yeah, I mean, I guess, was it basically right after that you just took the ball, and just ran with it, as far as I'm going to start creating content like Jackass and I'm going to create my own sponsor me tapes? It's almost like a softball question, because I know skateboarders and like video and sponsor me tapes are just synonymous with one another, but I have to ask.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a point where it was like I didn't know how to edit videos. There was like the buck kind of stops here as far as like the video side of it. Like there was a ceiling there that like I was kind of like not working past. It was like I wasn't trying to really figure out how to do any of that. So at some point it became clear to me that I wanted to like establish myself as a skateboarding photographer. So at the ripe age of 15, when I had a MySpace account, a friend of mine and I made a dual business MySpace front end kind of thing, where it's just called Mix Photography, MX Photography. And it just was like a basic MySpace profile with picture, and it just in the photo section it had a bunch of like I look at them now and it's like so funny, like, because a good portion of them were literally like going and posing in the form of the trick, like on the top of a thing, and then taking the picture. But then also we were skating with some kids that were good at the time, and there's like, yeah, I still have those pictures somewhere, and it's like, so it's really cool to go back and look at those. But that was like the first time I had ever tried to have like an outward face have like kind of this established idea of me being like a photographer, and skateboarding was going to be an action sports endeavor.
Yeah,
it pretty much it stopped there. Like that's all it ever was, but that's what it was going to be.
Yeah. Gotta love MySpace. I miss MySpace sometimes. I literally tried to look up our band the other day on MySpace, and like so much of the site has changed. You can't even
It's
see the photos
broken.
anymore. Like
It's broken. It's really weird. It's like I've done the same in the last few years, and it's so strange that like 2 years ago I went to that page and tried to look at the photos, and it was like they're there, but they won't open, they won't show up, and then I just did it again recently. Same deal. Like MySpace definitely doesn't have its shit together.
well, it sounds like your first, like, what was it called? MX.
MX, yeah.
Yeah, MX photography is probably also like lost in the MySpace archives, unfortunately. Um, so as your photography interests, kind of expand and evolve as you get older, and um, I imagine you didn't just stick with strictly skate photography. I'm sure it morphed into other things, and you tried out different things. What was the next thing that you kind of dip your toe into as far as like a project or an interest?
Um, well, then I would say that like the next step that for me was what happened at the age of like kind of 16 and 17. And that's actually when you and I met, that I started taking pictures at concerts. Like, by whatever means, like usually just sneaking in like a really tiny digital camera and taking pictures of bands like Under Oath or Thrice or Poison the Well, or taking it into Warped Tour, or whatever, and I would just post them on MySpace, like in a bulletin or like whatever the blog post was on the profile back then. And that was like that was like a reintroduction to photography. It was like all the studio the stage lights that they use for concerts, and like all the people and the sweat and the wet and the just the colors, all that stuff was like totally brand new to me when the first time I like brought a camera into a concert venue. And it was like, that was just a whole nother thing. It was like at the same time, similar to what happened to me at a earlier age with Thrasher, I was being introduced to things like Alternative Press Magazine and band promo photography and like all of this other cultural stuff that we were swimming in at the time, and so that that was like the next kind of stage for me, where it was like, yep, I love this is also awesome, and it's also just the sickest thing I can think of happening in front of me, and it's like you're there documenting it. There might be 6 other photographers there, but you're the one standing right there with you're doing your thing, seeing exactly what you're seeing through that lens, or with your own eyes, like whatever. So that was huge.
Yeah, so it seems like things like Alternative Press and a lot of other like music publications and culture things that were like booming around then, like you said, we were already swimming in. Do you think it's kind of like a chicken or the egg thing, or maybe it's a little bit of both? Where do you think we were more influenced by things like that, and so it was just natural to want to just partake in it and take photos of it? Or do you think we were already kind of into it through like MySpace and other things, and then we just wanted to actively participate in it? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I know that for me, it was like, I can definitely kind of retrace the steps and know that like I liked photography, and like, and then I liked skateboarding. And then you and I met like in our circle of friends and in our group at like the like 15, 16, 16, 17, whatever. And like, we had all kind of come together. I feel like you and I, like, we really bonded over music, and we connected over music or whatever. But then also, as we became friends, like I know that like this happened with like much of our friends group. Like we learned that we also had like interests and talents that we, it was like, and like that stuff, I just remember like being kind of the subject of our focus and our pursuits, like, since then even. And to me, it's like, I see two kind of sides, and like I'm not trying to be like, oh, like there's like normies and then there's us. Like it's not what I mean, but I do see like groups of people or people I know where it's like they like something, but they are able to kind of keep it there and leave it at bay. And like it's just like kind of a hobby or an interest, and it kind of sits like in it, they're in a corner of their interest and mind and life or whatever. And then I know with like myself and with a lot of my friends, it's kind of, there's never really been like that much of a like a question of whether or not we would be involved in like the circulation of these things, or sort of like the process of these things in like some way, form or another, like in terms of like design or contributing via photography or contributing via like copywriting. Like I know people who do that for bands, like people who make Shopify websites for artists. Like I know a lot of people that I came up with, like me, and I know like a lot of the just what we grew up with. Like a lot of our friends were like the type of people to jump headfirst into something because they like it, you know, instead of like instead of thinking like, oh well, you know, that might not be practical because like, you know, I grew up on a farm where it probably didn't seem very practical to want to pursue music and skateboarding as a career endeavor. But I think that as we were lucky to kind of be born, like positioned where we were in time and like born when we were, because I feel like we were able to be like, you know, kind of like integrated into computers and technology and the internet enough at the time to kind of know where those things were going. Like where old timers may have seen like music or skateboarding, like I think that like people like us have always kind of saw like the media world around it and like what was selling and we were being sold to, you know, like you couldn't really ignore that as a kid. Like when you're begging for $60 skateboards at Christmas, or you're begging for a DVD that costs $25, you know, it's like, I think that we kind of, I don't know if that answers the chicken or the egg question, but that's kind of the feeling I'm picking up.
Yeah, no, it seems like it was like, I think you nailed it, where it was all around us and it was proof, you know, proofs in the pudding. You're seeing these things like sell like crazy in stores. You're seeing Warped Tour and all these music festivals and all these things that we were super into being really, really successful. And you're seeing people that are maybe 5 to 10 years older than us having legitimate careers and making legitimate, you know, income on its own. And so you're 16 or 17 years old at the time. I know we were in a couple different bands over like those next couple of years. And I know you were always interested in photography and doing that, you know, with our bands, and then also like going to shows, things like that. It was kind of like it was like an appendage for you of like just taking photos everywhere you went. It's interesting you mentioned that connection of realizing people can make legitimate money careers. This can be something where you don't necessarily have to go to like college or like a trade school or whatever. You can kind of just do it and just nose to the grindstone, make it happen. Did you feel you were going to do that? Did you make that connection and say, no matter what, or like, I'm going to try and make this like a thing, like a career move?
No. There was never like that thought never actually occurred to me. Like there was never a moment where I felt like an ultimatum, you know, like to me, it was just something that I always loved and I knew I would always do, even if it was just me doing it like individually or personally, you know, and like that has opened up opportunities along the way that like, you know, and doors have opened that I've chosen to walk through. And like it by proxy or just organically has been revealed to me that there are careers in this. And I was being hired by people that were double my age that had businesses and stuff like that, you know, to do the thing that I had been already kind of working towards all through high school. And, you know, like, even if it wasn't happening in school, like it was just, I never really thought, I felt like enough the pressure of like, oh shoot, like, what am I going to do? Is photography it? That never happened.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's probably like, honestly, like a healthier approach of not really putting too much pressure on yourself, or looking at an outlet or something you really like and trying to force like what is it, like a square peg into a round hole of like, oh, I absolutely need to make this happen right now. Well, it kind of just worked out.
Let me just mention that, like, I just for clarity's sake, like I definitely had moments like that where I like was looking at other career directions where it was like, there's something that I need to do. And like, you know, like photography isn't doing that for me. This thing that I need right now, like right now, you know, like either I don't have like the business plan set up to make this fully functional as like my own business right now, or that it just like looks like more promising in this other direction or with this other company or whatever, like, you know. And like even just like I went to I signed up to go to school at Galvanize, which is a like a software development boot camp program And I went through the entire initial stage of that program and made it about a month into that thing. And the whole time, like I had, during that month, it was cool because I just kind of become friends with the professors and the people that were putting that program on by bringing my camera along to our events and doing pictures that they were then like, oh yeah, like you took these pictures with the real camera. Can we use these for social media? Can we use these for the galvanized website? Whatever. And so that I ended up like doing the photo retakes for the little program yearbook for like the students that didn't like their pictures. It was just kind of like a weird thing where it was like, even there where like my focus should have been on the program, this education of that program, like I was just taking pictures and kind of like doing my thing. And yeah, a month into that program, my brain was so fried, and I was like, dude, this is whatever this is, it's not happening right now, and it's not for me, and I'm gonna decide to like call it on the 2 G's that I'm gonna lose by pulling out of this program instead of paying the 20 grand that it's gonna cost, So it was like that happened. And yeah, immediately after I well, like during the fallout of that, during my my exit from that program, is when I found out about a job opening for like a video editing position that I ended up taking and working for a long time. So long-winded answer, but the moments of oh shit, like, is this going to work? Like it didn't really translate to photography because it was just kind of like, again, I knew that I would be doing photography wherever I was. It was just like, where can I be housed, or where can I make some money? What can I do like at the time right now? Sometimes that was influenced by having a new child in my life or something like that too.
Yeah. So it sounds like it was a habit and an interest that you kind of, it seemed like you had no choice but to carry it along with you and kind of wear that hat wherever you went, and you looked for opportunities, not even 100% intentionally. I mean, you were in like a trade school kind of boot camp thing, and you end up bringing your camera and doing things there. I mean, it just seems apparent that it was something that mattered so much to you that you were willing to just find opportunities or look for opportunities or be ready for opportunities wherever you went. And you kind of had this, I don't know, confidence. It's like quiet confidence that things, you're just going to like find a way or use it or kind of have that outlet. And then like you said, it ended up, working out and panning out into like a job. Talk about that. Cause I was curious, after music and photography and us being in bands and then realizing, okay, being a full-time touring musician might not work out.
Right. That question you asked about photography and like, did you have this moment of like, can this happen like that? Put that on the band thing, because 100% it was like that happened with that. And the answer was like, is this sustainable? And of course, at the time it was no.
And how old
like,
were you then?
For both of us.
Yeah.
For both of us at different times. For me, it was like 21.
Yeah.
It was like 21 kind of began like the stages of like the end of like traveling and touring. 21, 22. I don't know. Okay, I'm wrong. So 23 is actually like when my girlfriend got pregnant with our first child. So like that was like when there was some of those questions like started getting sharper points, where it was like, is this practical and then or sustainable really? Because like I don't think my job right now is practical. I shouldn't say practical, but like is this sustainable? The answer was no. Mm-hmm. And that was at the age of like 23, and that was right around the same time as like all the galvanized thing, and then getting that job as a video editor.
Yeah. So talk to me how kind of deciding, throwing in the towel, losing a couple grand on a trade school, you ended up in like a video editing chair at a job.
Yeah, I mean that was just like. It was like, I was splitting my time between Denver and Colorado Springs, where the two places that I have lived in Colorado, Monument, Colorado Springs, whatever. But I was splitting my time between school at that program there in Colorado Springs. And I had recently met and become really good friends with this guy named Isaac Anderson. And he was just somebody that was mutual friends through a couple of guys who played music in different bands in Colorado Springs throughout the years. But yeah, Noah and Michael, they're in a band called High Ghostly, who plays in Philadelphia right now. But they introduced me to this dude Isaac at a Black Sheep concert or show and I was wearing my camera around my neck, whatever. I had my camera, and he just was like, "Hey, do you work?" What, like we just started talking, I come to find out that he works at a production company that's based in Monument, Colorado, that does military films. And I was like, huh, wow, that sounds terrible, but like that's cool though, and like to me it was like more how terrible doing industrial military films sounded was definitely overpowered and overshadowed by the idea that there was a film production company in Monument, Colorado. That's what stood out more to me. But he was saying that he was working as a production assistant on their shoots, and that they sometimes needed extra hands. And so I was like, yeah, dude, put me in, because at the time I was still working production assistant jobs on TV gigs in Denver. So those are like one-offs. There's a website called Staff Me Up where people in the production world can apply to productions that are like popping up locally, traveling through different places, whatever. Everyone in the production industry got, like, most people got in the production industry still use it, or either got their start on Staff Me Up for getting like just basic, like, bottom of the barrel jobs on set, right? So like, to me, just the idea of having that be in Monument, like, again, my girlfriend was pregnant with our first child, so like I'm bouncing back between Denver and Colorado Springs trying to get like this trade school degree. That didn't work out. I wound up back just kind of chilling in Colorado Springs. Here's this production company that's like looking for help doing the same kind of work that I had been doing, like, at the time, right? So, and it was close, it was local. So to me, it was just like, seemed like the stars were aligning in terms of like trying to like figure out how to have a baby and like get that baby born and settling and all of that stuff. Eventually, that was a job as a production assistant on set at first, and I did that with them for 6 months before Isaac and I both got offers for salary positions at the company, me as a video editor and him as a production coordinator.
Mm-hmm. And so
that's, yeah,
being in, like in a kind of, it sounds like it was more of like an office-y type job in Monument, Colorado, doing kind of industrial military video editing work. Could you still zoom out and focus on the fact that you had such a great opportunity to get experience and to like have a stable job? Or were there times where you were kind of longing for that fiery passion of like the underlying subject matter, where you had like music, you're no longer doing live concerts or shows, and you're not doing skateboarding? I'm curious, like, how long before, or if you ever hit that point of maybe I want to do something more interesting?
Yeah. So like, one thing that we didn't really talk about too much, but was definitely like a big part of my life during the teenage and developmental years, was like movies and just like film stuff. I really liked horror movies. I became super attached to horror movies after being introduced to like a couple of movies by an ex, like a girlfriend at the age of 15. My ex introduced me to like House of a Thousand Corpses and like The Lost Boys, and just like kind of these like cool girly teenage horror movies that if you see them at the right time, like, you're like, holy shit, this is so hot, like, this is sick. Like, I don't know, that to me, that definitely happened, and it inspired this like kind of lust for like the film production, like interest and all of that stuff. So when I found myself at this this like kind of corporate cultured mid-sized company that was producing industrial films for the Air Force, there definitely was like an initial like kind of like I was definitely hesitant, because it was like I knew where this place was, I knew what kind of like who the client was, which was the military, and it was like, first of all, like I have my appearance to worry. I've got like to me walking into a place like that for the first time, it was like always feels a little weird because I'm covered in tattoos, and I tend to just dress down a little bit, and so there was like that side of it. So I was kind of like a little bit nervous and anxious about going in as just kind of with my background and my experience, and wondering if this was even possible or if it was going to work out. But then also, yeah, there was like there was a question going into that job for me, was like whether or not it was going to just be like so far gone from anything that I could possibly find interesting. But immediately that was turned upside down on its head, because like when I started working on set as a production assistant, this company was just producing films with real camera packages, real lights, real production process regarding like locations and like pre-production. And to me, just the fact that that was all happening in Monument was like way enough for me. It was like, this is like a real company doing like the film production, and not in the sort of new age way that I was seeing at the same time, where it was like you'd see a single person or a couple of people with like smaller cameras make, you know, 2-man banding or 1-man banding a project and like kind of cobbling together something that can go on, you know, like a website or whatever. Like this was like a film company. And so you know, one of my first days on set, I asked if it was okay if I brought my camera along and did like behind the scenes still photos, and the director and owner of the company, Denise Ferrari, said yes. And yeah, all of those photos ended up going on to be used for various marketing endeavors and, you know, little like website, you know, like elements and lots of stuff like those. And immediately they were like, yes, this is something that we can use and will be helpful, and like we've never had a behind the scenes presence for any of our productions before. So boom, photography was immediately established as part of what I did in that company. And like even as a video editor, I was a camera operator for our still photo shoots that we would do like at the LSI studio up in Denver for like when the military needed posters made for something. And it was like, you know, I was a video editor there, but immediately I knew that the culture of the company was going to allow me to do other things that weren't just like exactly labeled, you know, specific to the job title. And that's why I was there for 6 years until the company dissolved in the midst of COVID times.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I didn't realize you worked there for that long. That's like a lot of time to spend somewhere. And it sounds like you obviously had a lot of creative freedom, and it was probably a pleasant surprise going into a company that seemed conservative and obviously military focused, and it's based in Monument. So maybe not as, I don't know, didn't offer the opportunities that aligned with what you were looking for out of photography and video editing, but it sounded like it worked out. And so, yeah, you mentioned, unfortunately, it comes to an end in COVID times. So I know you're not doing like the office typical 9 to 5 thing now. Like, explain what kind of happened next.
Yeah. So that just like by a stroke of like good fortune, I would say, like like my tenure at Ferrari Films as like a salaried person ended on September 1st, 2020. And through via staff me up, I had applied as a production assistant on a gig that was coming through Colorado Springs. So it was like a 4-day shoot or whatever. And I knew that it was for the Oxygen Network. So I applied as a production assistant, and I got a call from a producer that was based in Philadelphia. This guy named Fred Breeze. And he passed me on to the field producer, this guy, Tony. And I worked the shoot. I worked a single episode on a TV show called Mastermind of Murder. And that was in September of 2020. And so it was just like interviews, B-roll. On the first or second day, I asked the executive producer of the show, Dave Cargill, if I could take behind the scenes photos, because every shoot I've ever been, I've been a production assistant on many shoots, different kinds of productions. Because I've been working off and on as a production assistant for the last 10 years of my life. So every single shoot I brought my camera, and on every shoot I've asked somebody if it's okay if I take stills, except for one on Kitchen Nightmares when I was 21 years old. I didn't ask if I could take behind the scenes still photos, and I just started doing it. And Gordon Ramsay's bodyguard, who was like an ex linebacker, was this big dude. He came up to me and he was like, "Are you working on the show?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm a PA." And he's like, give me your memory card. So I take my memory card out of the camera, and he just snaps it in half right in front of me. Like he was pissed. Like he was like, why the hell is this PA taking pictures of Gordon Ramsay on this set right now?
Whoa.
That was like 9 years ago, and it scared the shit out of me. I didn't get fired from that job. They actually just put me on like security, like location lockdown detail. So they just sent me like 100 yards away from where they were filming and set me there for the rest of the day. But yeah, no, so again, on this Mastermind of Murder shoot, first or second day, I asked if I could take some stills, and they were like, yeah, sure, dude, whatever, as long as you're doing the other parts of the job, essentially. But yeah, so that shoot came and went, and the really cool thing about that shoot was the director of photography, the DP, this guy named Matt Jaffe. He is based in Philly. We kind of connected on that shoot, and a cool deal where one of the locations that we were supposed to film at, an Airbnb for interviews, fell through. So we needed to find a last minute location, and I offered up my house. And that day worked so well that they decided to actually scrap the location on the second day they were supposed to shoot after that. So we ended up shooting at my house for just 2 days straight. So that just was like hangs, essentially, like they got to see my pet reptiles. They got to see my posters, and we were talking and whatever. And meanwhile, I was taking behind the scenes stills, and it was just a good shoot. It was a good 5-day shoot in Springs, because like shoot for like cool documentary series projects traveling through Colorado Springs is already rare. Also, I lost my job like September 1st. This job started on September 6th of that month. So it was just like, gave me a lot of hope on that show. I ended up actually getting like a field assistant camera credit on that episode, which was just like a cool thing that like had been worked out with the production company, because I was able to like volunteer a little bit extra in terms of being a PA on the shoot. So I ended up with getting a field assistant camera credit, and I just came out of that shoot feeling really good and like hopeful for my career in the film industry in the future. And yeah, and then like I follow those guys on social media, whatever, and like sometime however many months, 8 or 9 months had passed, and I got a call from the B camera operator, and he were a text actually, and he sent me a picture of his like a screenshot of his background on his phone, and it was one of my behind the scenes stills that I'd taken like a year prior, and I was just like, oh, this dude still like has that as his like wallpaper. That's sick. And then he and I were just kind of like bullshitting and like, how you doing, catching up, whatever. And then a week later, the guy that had been the field producer on that episode of Mastermind of Murder back in 2020 called me, in like May or June of 2021, and was like, hey, like, what's up? How you doing? Whatever. Me and Matt Jaffe and Gabe, the B camera guy, we are working on another show right now. It's another true crime thing. Dave Cargill too is the same executive producer. But they called me up and were like, hey, we're doing another series. It's true crime. It's a little different, but it's the same kind of thing. But we need to get somebody else in the field to make things happen, because we've got some stuff that's falling apart here. So they just asked if I wanted to do an entire series, travel on an entire series with them. And that was like, I had worked other jobs in between those times, like when I had done that production assistant gig in Colorado Springs, and that 9 months later, I did a lot of PA jobs, a lot of camera operator jobs on sporting events, whatever. And it was kind of like nothing that cool, but all still just it's what I do. It's like now, as a freelancer at this time, I shoot and work on productions. But yeah, so for me to get a call and be like, yo, do you want to do this with a lot of days? Because that's what that means, like we got day rates in the film and television industries a lot of times. And so it's like, I might get a camera operator gig in Colorado and it's like $400 a day, which is pretty good, but it's like maybe a 2-day event or 3-day event. Right. So it's like it's just a lot of management and time. Kind of, you got to kind of be on your toes in terms of scheduling and doing all of that. So to get the offer to like have this kind of consistency again, but also face like it's going to mean traveling away from your family for like X amount of months until this season 1 of this new murder doc series is finished. And so it was like definitely like wrestled with that and all of that, but I took it, and God bless my girlfriend Alyssa for like managing things at home and making that happen, because we didn't know at all what that was going to be like. And we were also moving at like the time in between like the first and second shoot that I had on that series, which are, the shoots are split up kind of like where it's like 2 weeks out of each month, basically you're gone doing like a couple of episodes or whatever. But yeah, so that show came and went, and it was awesome. It's the best job. It's the best like production I've ever worked on to this day. It was just like some really awesome players in terms of like what I think the show is going to be and amount to. It was just like all the effort was there, and the executive producer writing these things was amazing, and the stories are there and all of that stuff. So I'm just was very stoked to be a part of that and to get that. And that was that. I didn't know what was going to be next. But then sure enough, I find out that Mastermind of Murder, that show I'd worked on in Colorado Springs, was going on to do season 2. So that picked up and started in November of 2021. That's my current job, is just going out every month for a couple of weeks and doing episodes for season 2 of Mastermind of Murder. And so no longer a production assistant. I'm like a production utility person is what they call me, but really it means that I'm just working with like the DP to set up lights and be kind of like a key grip and media manager, and like, just take care of all the footage that we're shooting every day and make sure everything gets back to Philadelphia where they're editing this stuff safely, and work with the producer to make sure that everything is running smoothly in like day-to-day operations. It's just a lot of flying around, a lot of like driving around in vans to suburban areas where these murders happened, and still like doing behind the scenes photography for each of these. And it's like all that stuff tends to get used for like marketing campaigns down the road. So like to me, it's still like just a big part of my job is getting to like document the production itself and take stills and like have that be a part of my job, no matter like what my actual job on set is.
Yeah. So it sounds like with all the traveling and kind of like it isn't like a conventionally scheduled, planned out job like a lot of careers are. And so you mentioned your girlfriend, obviously, like Alyssa, and your kids. You're away from them a lot. What do your kids think of photography? And it might be like a huge question, but like, what do they think of your job? Do they think it's cool that, like you mentioned, you're in credits of shows and, you always have this huge interest in photography? What do they think of that? They think it's cool? Or are they like, oh, like dad's job is lame? Or like, are they like too young for that yet? Or like, what do they think?
Well, so I got back from a 3-week trip 2 days ago. So like, I feel like it's always a little different, but like right now it's kind of like we're just very happy. I'm very happy to be home, and like we've just been like soaking up like each other's company for the last 2 days, because I've been it's 3 weeks is a long time to be away from a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. They look a little different, every time I come back from a trip, which trips me out like every time. But they do think it's cool. They talk about it. One really cool thing happened on that the show that I was working on in like September. I want to say this happened, or maybe August of 2021. But this guy Gabe that I'm working with on these shows, he was like the director of photography and kind of like the lead guy on a kids show for Nat Geo and Disney Plus. It's the show's called Weird But True, and it's got these 2 hosts, Charlie and Sam. They're like these bubbly, vibrant, hosts of a kids TV show where you just learn about things. It's like the show's Weird But True. They have an episode on trains. They have an episode on fossils. They have an episode on bugs. It's like an educational Nat Geo show. So Gabe, this guy I've been working with, that was his baby season. They did 3 seasons of that show, and like my kids loved that show before I ever met this guy. And so that was a connection that was made when they were out in Colorado when I first worked with them. And it was just like, oh, dang, dude, like that's you that does that show. That's crazy. Like me and my kids just watched season 2. Like, it was like so cool. And like, so then, fast forward a year later, we're talking about it again in season 3 that had since come out that he had worked on. And We talked. I told him that my kids still love the show, whatever. And like, I went back to my hotel room. This was in Pittsburgh. I went back to my hotel room, and then he texted me like 30 minutes later, and he was like, "Yo, dude, come back to my room real quick." I thought that there was gonna be like a problem with this food because we had just like Grubhub or something, like, whatever. I go in there, and he's like, "Yo, check it out," and he shows me his phone. He's got a video of Charlie, the host of the show, with a personalized video for Rowan and Salem, where he says their names. He's like, "Thank you so much for watching the show. Like, you guys are, I appreciate you, like Rowan and Salem, like you guys are awesome, and like, keep it up," or whatever. Like, it was kind of like one of those cameo videos that you would see, but it was super personalized, and just like, I was like tearing up, when it happened. And my kid, like, I was on FaceTime with my kids when they watched the video, like after I'd sent it to them, and it was so cool. It was just like one of the, like, so freaking cool. So yeah, there's like they know that I'm going out and like doing TV shows, and they know that I'm going out and doing shows that they're not allowed to watch because it's like murder. These are true crime. It's true crime stuff. I think that ultimately, like, they get it, and they know that it's something that I kind of have to do. But I think that, yeah, the being away is hard, and that's something that I don't know what that's going to look like in 6 months. Like, I don't know if it's going to be sustainable. I don't know if there's going to be a point where I'm going to have to pivot to like to be planted. I think that there will be, because to me, it's like, I just can't practically be gone like that. But there's local productions, and there's like all sorts of stuff. And I have been kind of juggling those ideas for a while, like in some sense, so. But yeah, and then in terms of like photography, they love it. They are efficient with DSLR cameras that some adults, I hand it to them, and they're like, "Ah, what is this thing?" Like my kids, they are very much a part of the digital era. They love YouTube. They like are aspiring YouTube content creators right now, and so we're having conversations about like, titling a channel, and like making themes for like what things could be about, or like what we could film them doing that actually could translate to like a digestible video. So like, and these are conversations that I'm having with a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. So a lot of times it amounts to, how much editing am I willing to do to like, make something happen? And really it's just for fun at this point, but they are totally a part of this, and they get it, in terms, like, as much as I've ever seen a 7 and a 4-year-old understand like digital media and like what it all is and does, they get it.
Yeah, man, that's really cool about the personalized video. That's got to be like completely mind blowing for like a 7 and a 4-year-old. Like,
well, yeah, dude, and like so there's Charlie and Sam. Charlie's the guy. Unfortunately, like, they're both girls, but like it didn't matter. These were like fictional superheroes to them, and so yeah, for them to get that was like pretty earth shattering in the moment.
Yeah, well, and the fact that they're, like you said, efficient with DSLR cameras and interested in photography. I'm curious if you could think of things like life applicable lessons that you've learned just through being independently interested, going through your own little like phases of music stuff, ended up at like a kind of like a salary corporate culture job, and then you're back into like a freelance making TV shows. I imagine there's probably like an entire episode we could talk about just things you've learned and like things that kind of life lesson-y things. But I'm curious if you've shared any of that stuff with your kids, or if there's something that your interest in photography and in production and videography that you've shared with them.
I can't think of anything like directly applicable that has been like translated yet. I know that like something that I'm finding for myself right now through photography is like my own obsession with experience, and like not just being on the receiving end of media. Like, and like people talk about, taking breaks from technology all the time and that kind of stuff. But what I'm hoping to instill, like to try to teach them, like I kind of hate the word instill, but I would like to instill in them that like the best things that are captured are experiences. And I think that like, just to me, I watch the way that my kids interact with technology, and I am always just hoping and trying to like verbalize the idea that like this isn't like staying inside, staying inside and interacting with media and like making videos and all of that stuff can be so awesome and so like pure in many ways. But like, I think that in a lot of people's lives and for a lot of people, it is getting in the way of like experience and going out and like actually doing things. And like, as a parent, I have to kind of like step in the way of like consumption culture because me and my girlfriend and my two kids are all like very much wrapped up in just the consumption of things and content and all of that stuff. So like, to me, if like photography can be a tool to like actually get them out and be on the front side of that process to where it's like because that's what I love, to me, it's like, that's what I love about my job, and it's like, that's something that you can't just like give to a kid, but it's like the fact that like, going out and like experiencing these things that can happen in front of a camera like that to me is beautiful. Like that's like the beauty of it for me. And it's like I totally hope that they have their own reasons for loving anything that they love moving forward, but like I would love to be able to share with them like tools and things that can like separate them from technology, even if they are tools that are definitely used for the technology machine, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I love that perspective of getting in on the other side of the camera and experiencing things and making sure that it's like in like a tangible physical form and not just in like a media consumption way. Because my daughter is 3 months old, and the other day I'm holding her on the like couch and like I go to like adjust her to like burp her or something, and my wife is watching like a hockey game or something, and it was the first time I saw like a 3-month-old like pivot her head away from me and what was going on and just like stare at a screen. And it was like a moment of, oh man, like she is, 90 days old and she's already preferring that over just, in-person stuff. And of course, new parent fears and things like that. I'm like, oh boy, like I'm already like, oh, we have to limit her screen time. But of course that's outrageous. But yeah, I mean,
it's hard, dude, in a world where the delicate balance between like, where's the economy going? Where are jobs doing? Are we grounding kids from the thing that like will teach them the skills that they need to work? Like, because that's kind of, we experienced some of that. Like every time, we got grounded from MySpace, which was like something that was kind of like, that was the first software look into software engineering that I had ever had.
Yeah, same.
And it's and I completely sympathize with my parents, right? Like,
yeah,
that's tough. There's no like easy solution or clear path. I think, especially as being parents in 2022 of young children, it's like, holy cow, like where are the digital media jobs going to be? What cool jobs will exist? Like what, because I think that, like, to me, it's like, I've always loved jobs like journalists who had to go and like they had to go and be there and they had to write about these things and they'd send it back to the paper and people would read about it. And the sharing of information is not ugly to me. Like that to me is like a cool thing, but it's like it can become so overwhelming. So yeah, dude, like that, and that's something that I struggle with. Like I have wrestling bouts in my mind about this kind of stuff, like regarding kids all the time, because I have to shift my position on a day-to-day basis and check myself, because like so easily I can just fall into the grounding tendencies of my parents, where it's like, oh, the iPad gets taken away, or oh, like, this is how it's going to be from now on weekdays. Like there's all these things. But yeah, I think that like every time I see them use something that is like in the technologically modern world, and I see them using it in a way that like, can get them like to experience something like that, that to me is like always a moment of reassurance, because usually it's just mostly me doubting the sanity of the online world and like where, the culture of some of these spaces that we work and live in.
Yeah. And it's changing all the time. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. Being a parent in modern day is scary, but let's pivot. Into
I remember when
stuff.
my kids were 3 months. Yeah. I remember my kids were 3 months old. Your kid's 3 months old right now. You got to be freaking out.
Yeah. And then you add a global pandemic into it and all the like politicized stuff that goes along with that. And yeah, and just, you know what? God. Just taking it a day at a time. It'll work out. We were fine. They'll be fine. But yeah, it's a completely different landscape. But to more lighthearted stuff, I have some rapid fire questions I want to ask. You mentioned your love of film and horror movies. You and I share a lot of these. Like a desert island horror movie. What would it be?
Alien.
Nice. I thought it might have been House of 1,000 Corpses, but Alien. I should have known. Okay.
It's just like every time I watch it, it's something new. So I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Okay. So, the best vegan spot with all your traveling and stuff. I'm sure you've experienced some sweet places, but the best vegan spot for like food. What was it?
So, oh my God, dude,
But it's hard.
Okay, so this is like frustrating because like 5 days ago, I was in Atlanta on an off day, and I had a lot of vegan food in Atlanta, but there was this joint that we went to. It was like, gosh, dude, okay, I'm just gonna drop something that I can't think of the name of because I don't need to tell the story because I can't remember the name. But there was this really awesome place in Atlanta, and it was like super low key, run by this like 30-year-old chick who just was an amazing cook and had an awesome menu. I really wish I could think of the name right now, but I will say that the shout out to all of the Thai restaurants that are scattered across the US, because there's like a Thai restaurant in every city and they always have something that can be made vegan. So that's definitely a shout out. But yeah, aside from that, like I would say there's Homegrown Smoker I went to in Portland, and that just closed. Like it just closed down permanently. Like, and I was there in November, so I feel really fortunate that I got to go. And so that would be probably, and that was like the two recommendations that were on your list that you gave me for Portland were both like in my top 5 vegan experiences ever. So
yeah,
and that was Fire on the Mountain and Homegrown Smoker, by the way.
Yeah, Fire on the Mountain. There's one in Denver. Well, there's 2 in Denver, but I'm like actually like right after this, I'm literally going to go upstairs and ask my wife if we can go because I feel like I need to have it like
there's
once
2 Fire on the Mountains in Denver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one in the Highlands and there's one kind of like not downtown. It's like south. I don't know like areas of Denver super well, like the like little like suburby like neighborhoody parts. But yeah, there's 2 of them, dude.
Bro.
Yeah.
Sick. Okay.
But like
wow,
if we're talking
I can't
about
wait
it
to get those wings. Those wings. They have vegan chicken wings with a sugar cane bone. So it's like a tender stock of a sugar cane, and they just cook the seitan chicken wing onto that. So you just eat it off the bone of plant. It's so good.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get those in Denver tomorrow.
I love it. Okay. So I know speaking of like music and being in bands and doing a lot of photography and live music, I know you've been through quite a few music phases. More recent, kind of like stoner doom metal-y type things. I know you're really into it, but I know when we were like teenagers, it was into like hardcore and stuff like that. If you had to pick like Desert Island, like a stoner doom genre as a whole, or like the like teenage year like MySpace hardcore genre, what would it be?
Oh dude, that's not fair. Like
it's not fair, but that's why it's
not fair because it just is it's such a mood thing. I still listen to all that stupid bullshit we listened to back then, but it's a mood thing, man.
Right.
I would have to go, if we're talking about the entire palette of like a record collection between like what's sitting on my spin shelf right now compared to like what I had in CDs in my car back then, I would pick those because I had my favorite records to this day were in that collection, like like including bands like Brand New and stuff that wasn't exactly like hardcore sceney weenie. If I would take the music for me at that time to a desert island, because all the stoner doom metal stuff I listen to right now are like 8-minute songs where it's like the same riff played however many times. Right. And I think that on a desert island, I would just get, that's my, like, I want to disappear into the ethos of the universe, like lose, like, just like let my mind think of nothing, like repetitive drone zone music. And all those other albums, like I could listen to like Under Oath albums thousands of times without like going to drone zone and needing that. Like,
yep.
So yeah, I'll take the OG Lewis Palmer High School days record collection.
So this might be a little bit of a softball, but they're so different. If you had like a one magazine subscription, let's pretend that like you're getting print magazine subscriptions on a desert island as well. Thrasher or Transworld?
Oh, that is a throwaway question, dude. Yeah, I mean, Transworld is great and it's cool, and they're trying to do their own thing, but the style Transworld is like tech. Transworld is baggy pants. Transworld is like, you know, Kareem and P-Rod. Right. Thrasher is, you know, Jeff Rowley and fucking like OG anti-hero. Right. You know, like the crusty San Francisco side of skateboard. I like rock and roll.
So when I wrote this question, that was like a really good analogy because, and I couldn't think of like how to like say it or like articulate how I felt, like how different they were. But it's like, if you were a skateboarder or whatever, they're super, super, super different. But I honestly would say that if like us as like really good friends were like magazines, I was definitely the Transworld dude because I subscribe to Transworld, and like I love P-Rod and I love Kareem and I love all those like baggy pants stuff, like especially like then.
Yeah, you're chocolate. Yeah. Dude.
Oh yeah, like the best skateboard team.
Yeah.
And like you're totally like a Thrasher. Like it makes sense if anyone knows you. It's like yeah, like if you had to be a skateboard magazine, that would be it.
Yeah,
man, those are some good questions. I'm glad the last one I like literally wrote down last minute because I was like, oh, I'd be like, yeah, I know what he's gonna say, but it'll be interesting.
Such a good question. That's a great question. I mean, it's so obvious to me, like, but that's a really good question because some people don't. Skateboarding is a skateboard. A skateboard mag is a skateboard mag, you know. But since day one, yeah, they've definitely been totally a different vibe.
100%. Okay, so plugs. I'm sure you have a lot of stuff, but now's your chance to tell the peeps what you're working on, what they should check out. Fire away.
Dude, I 100%. My plug is that the TV show that I got to work was super lucky to get the call to come out and work on and film episodes starting last July or whatever. But yeah, that show was under a working title at the time, but it's officially called Crime Scene Confidential now. And it's a hosted show. And the host of the show, her name is Alina Burrows. She has pink hair and she's awesome. And she's just she became a good friend of mine, like during the production of that show. And I just think that it's like a great talent. It's season 1 for the show, and it's going to be on the channel is called Discovery ID. So it's like the ID network. It's Investigation Discovery. So I don't know how that sits with like viewing packages or like how you can watch that, but I know that Discovery Channel is, you know, it's like there's a big syndication of distribution. So it definitely can be watched via streaming, and it definitely can be watched through like a Discovery Channel streaming service, but it's also on cable television. And I'm not sure whatever the ID channel is. But yeah, that's supposed to be coming out, I think, like right at the beginning of second quarter is how that works. So I think maybe like it might be releasing sometime toward the end of February or early March. So yeah, Crime Scene Confidential, ID Network. I would love for anybody I know to check that out because it's the first show. Like there was, you know, also I was also, it was really cool. Something worked out to where my friend Isaac got to work on that show with like the rest of the really tiny crew. So there's 5 of us on the road for the entire production of that. And Isaac and I were 2 of those people. And so just to me, I'm like super proud and like, you know, feel lucky to have worked with the DP, especially on that show, Matt Jaffe. So big plug there for me.
Hell yeah. I don't know many people that are involved in shows and will show up on credits. You're the only one. So that's super cool. And plus, who doesn't like crime stuff? That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's really hot right now. Like people are into true crime, and I think that's yeah. So if you are, I'm actually not, but if you are into that stuff, or if your girlfriend or wife is in that stuff, because you know she is, check it out.
Yep, absolutely. I love it, Mike. Well, thanks for doing this. It's been fun.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks again, Mike, for joining the show. It's always good talking with good friends. If you enjoyed the show and you're interested in supporting the show a little bit more, you can leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. If the podcast platform of your choice doesn't have reviews, you can follow us. That's probably the best way to support. If you're on social media and you're interested in following us on that, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Atomic Jolt Pod. That's Atomic Jolt POD. Thank you so much again for listening, and we'll see you next time.